What's up, guys? Enkiri here. Today we're going to talk about the knees over toes guy. Should you listen to his advice? Does he know what the heck he's talking about? I first saw this guy, I think, in an Instagram ad. It popped up on my feed a few months ago, and now he's taken to YouTube and he's taken it by storm. And his channel is seemingly blown up overnight. His stuff pops up in my recommended feed about 10 times a day, and I've gotten a bunch of requests for this one in the last few weeks. So I figured we should take a deeper look at his stuff and see what he's all about. So let's dive right in. So before we get into his actual advice, I do have to preface this video by saying that he is trying to get you to buy his training system, which is perfectly fine, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay for the system. But so I have to say that a lot of his information is essentially hidden behind a paywall. So basically, when I make this video series here, I'm working with what's available to me for free on his YouTube channel, the information that he puts out publicly. And personally, I think that that snapshot is enough to make a sound judgment of what you'd be getting if you purchased his coaching services. But others might not necessarily agree with that, so I do feel that I'm obligated to mention this fact before I get into the video. Alright, so who is the knees over toes guy? His name is Ben Patrick, and he advertises himself as an athlete, a basketball player, who once had chronic and debilitating knee pain that severely limited his playing ability in his early 20s. And now, about a decade later in his early 30s, he's much faster, much more explosive, a much better athlete, and he can jump way higher than he could a decade ago. And most importantly of all, he now has bulletproof, pain-free knees. He got rid of his knee pain, even though he's about 10 years older now. And he has the secret sauce that can give anyone the exact same results as him for the low price of $49.50 a month. Now, this is going to be a two-part series. I hate making two-part videos, but I didn't want to shortchange the info here. And I could tell that it was going to be way too long to hold on to you guys and your squirrel-like attention spans, so I'm cutting it in half, and we're going to break the series down into two main categories. Firstly, in part one today, we're going to look at his advice from a rehabilitative and injury prevention perspective. Is the advice that he's claiming cured his knee pain actually any good for resolving knee pain in general, or even for preventing it in the first place? And then secondly, in part two, which will be next week, we'll look at his advice from the perspective of building power and explosiveness, which is my wheelhouse and my passion. Just power and explosiveness, developing the raw horsepower of the athlete. Is his advice actually any good for taking a good athlete and making them a great athlete? Will it take an elite athlete and make them a world-class athlete? Does the stuff that he advocates actually have the potential to take you up a notch and help you get to the next level? Does he actually provide you with the tools to develop your raw physical capacities and enhance your overall raw athleticism? So let's get started today with rehab, injury prevention, and longevity. Let's first look at his video called How to Bulletproof Your Hamstring. Now, his basic plan here that he lays out in this video is to work on ankle mobility and hip mobility while building up some strength in the hamstrings, both in terms of their function as knee flexors by using the Nordic curl and its variations, as well as in terms of their function as hip extensors using the Romanian deadlift as your primary gauge there. And he wants you to progress from bilateral RDLs to single leg unilateral RDLs as you move along through the program, which personally I don't really think that that's a step up, to be honest, as you kind of be moving from focusing on a primary movement to focusing more on an ancillary movement if you did that. So personally, I don't really think that that specifically is the best course of action, but the general sentiment that he lays out in this video here is certainly a good one. Strong glutes, a strong lower back, strong hamstrings, both as hip extensors and as knee flexors, as well as adequate levels of hip mobility. You are certainly less likely to suffer a hamstring injury as an athlete if you've taken these measures and built up these capacities to solid, strong levels. So that's all really good advice there. And next, looking at his video called How to Bulletproof Your Knees, and the main exercise that he advocates for here is what he calls the ATG split squat, which is basically a lunge where he encourages you to allow for maximal forward knee travel. He even says that your heel can come off the ground while you do these and get those knee tendons and ligaments into a nice fully stretched position under load while moving through their absolute maximal range of motion. And I do have to say that there's a lot of good here in this movement if you are able to achieve this position adequately. Now, he claims that with his system, he can get literally anyone to be able to achieve this position adequately and pain-free. And so, if that's true, and if you're able to achieve that, then there is a lot of good here with this movement. You're working on unilateral strength, unilateral leg strength, and hip stability. You've got the knee on the front leg moving through much greater ranges of motion than you'd be able to achieve with most other exercises. And then on the trailing leg, you're basically working on hip flexor mobility with every single rep that you do. The kneeling hip flexor stretch, which is one of my favorites, is a great way to limber up the hip flexors. And this is essentially that same exact thing, except it's being done under load while also building strength at the same time in the front leg. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone there. And I agree with his overall philosophy that working and progressively overloading those non-muscular soft tissue structures in the knees through a full range of motion is the path to strong, resilient, and pain-free knees. Tendons and ligaments can be thickened and strengthened just like muscles can. I read an Instagram post yesterday from this girl talking about how she had to give up dancing, which was her favorite physical activity. And she had to give it up because she developed plantar fasciitis in her foot. And she couldn't handle it anymore. She just couldn't handle the pain. And I'm thinking to myself, why though? Just rehab your damn foot. Why give up dancing? Just rehab it and then get back to what you love. You know, we encounter volumes and intensities of loading in everyday life, and sometimes they're too much at once, or sometimes it's too much too soon, and something inevitably starts to hurt. And you learn from that, right? You learn from your errors and you amend them the second time around. You fix what you did wrong. But the way past pain isn't to hide from it. It's to face it head on with a progressive, logical, and intelligent plan forward. And that's what Knees Over Toes Guy is advocating for. And so I have to applaud that. That's good stuff. That's better than a lot of the information that you find out there. And as an inverse example of this is why steroid users suffer such a disproportionate number of tendon ruptures, outright ruptures, as compared to non-steroid users, because tendons and ligaments take much longer to develop than the muscles do. So a steroid user's muscular strength will literally outpace their tendon development to such a large degree that outright ruptures, which are actually pretty rare, simply become a commonplace occurrence. The muscles become so strong so quickly that they destroy the tendons. So these tissues are slower to develop in general, right? But there are things that we can do to enhance that process, and moving deliberately through a full range of motion under load and pumping plenty of blood, nutrient-rich blood, into these avascular tissues is one of those things that's very helpful. Targeted eccentric only work is another thing that's very helpful. And Knees Over Toes Guy does also seem to be a pretty big fan of eccentric only work where knee health and longevity and resilience are concerned. And that's a good thing. He has his own standards here and exercises for how to go about doing that properly. And I'm not going to dissect the specifics of those today, but the concept itself that he espouses here is very, very sound and backed by research. Where resolving tendinopathies is concerned, and I actually plan to make a video on this in the future, but where resolving tendinopathies is concerned, eccentric only work has been shown in numerous pieces of research to be incredibly beneficial for enhancing the tendon remodeling process, encouraging collagen realignment and cross-linking, as well as just increasing the overall load tolerance of the tendons. Personally, I've had great success in the past using some of these exact same concepts on both myself and on others in terms of resolving chronic, nagging tendon and joint issues. So that's another positive aspect of Knees Over Toes Guy's work here, as it would stand to reason that if these concepts can be used to resolve pre-existing joint issues, that they can then also be extrapolated to work for you from a longevity and durability perspective as well, simply by progressively building up those capacities to a certain degree or beyond that, a focal point in your training, thereby consistently building stronger tendons and stronger ligaments over time. Another aspect that he emphasizes and focuses on in his work that you don't really see anywhere else is tibialis training. And this aspect, I have to say, has kind of piqued my interest a little bit because he made some pretty good points regarding the function of the tibialis and its role in deceleration. And deceleration is something that I'm very interested in. Now, he has made some pretty bold claims, I will say, some pretty bold claims regarding what he thinks could be the effectiveness of these tibialis exercises, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but he does have me considering incorporating some of his training tips here just for the sake of seeing what happens, seeing if someone at my level can eke out more speed and more power improvements with something novel and untapped like this. Now, I'm not going to say anything conclusive right now in terms of the training effect that I think training this muscle directly could potentially have on my performance, because I honestly have no fucking idea. And I do think that from an individual to individual perspective, it would be largely dependent upon the individual that we're talking about. Because just because you haven't trained that muscle directly like he advocates, doesn't mean that you haven't been training it for many, many years as an athlete. Because you have been. Every single time that you run and every single time that you jump. But the difference is this sort of progressive loading in a more controlled environment could have a different sort of training effect. And that training effect could be particularly useful for certain individuals, especially elite athletes who've already built their base and kind of tapped out their resources everywhere else and are just looking to take performance to its absolute peak. I think what interests me even more here, though, would be how these exercises could potentially be used in a rehab setting. Because shin splints are motherfucking prolific among athletes, a lot of young athletes, and even just weekend warriors as well. And they can be a freaking career killer if they aren't able to be reeled in. And this is kind of where that individual difference aspects that I was referring to a minute ago comes into play here, because many athletes will never experience shin splints or shin pain in their freaking lives, even without ever training the tibialis muscle directly at all. But others will experience potentially debilitating and chronic degrees of shin pain and shin splints. And so having something like this that allows you to attack that potentially weak function directly and strengthen it in a controlled and progressive environment could be a lifesaver for rehabbing that type of injury. So I do think it's pretty damn cool that he's introduced unique equipment like this tib bar that you see him using in some of his videos, as it not only standardizes the exercise, but it makes the execution much smoother and much easier as well compared to the options that were available before, which makes progression more reliable. Now, from what I have seen, I do think that he may be hyping up this particular exercise just a little bit too much in certain instances, but that's not to say that it doesn't have value. I obviously think that it does have value. I just think that it has a highly specific usage, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, in this case, I think that it's actually that specificity and that uniqueness that really lends this exercise its value in the first place. Anyway, all told, from the perspective of athletic longevity, durability, and resilience, and even knee and potentially ankle rehabilitation, I have to give Knees Over Toes Guy, drum roll please, just kidding, I'm not going to assign a number value to it, but I give Knees Over Toes Guy pretty damn high marks overall in this regard. There are a lot of good things here, a lot of good tidbits that you could potentially take away to use in your own training, and a lot of solid ideas and solid theories. We're building strong, resilient, supple, and pain-free knees, hips, and ankles are concerned. And that wraps up part 1 of the series, guys. That's all I got for today. And remember, this one was by popular demand, and it took a lot of goddamn research and a lot of goddamn time to watch all of his stuff and compile all of this information. Remember, we still got a part 2 coming this week, so this shit took me a lot of time. And so if you requested this video or you just enjoyed watching it, please remember to hit the like button, share the video around so that it can get some damn views, and leave a comment down below so that crotchety old Mr. Algorithm doesn't forget about me. And if you really liked the video, then be sure to visit my website after you smash the like button, of course, and pick up one of my training programs, www.enkirielitefitness.com/training. templates. I've got programs for beginner trainees, programs for intermediate trainees, advanced trainees, performance-minded trainees like myself, and dudes who want to maximize their vertical jumping ability, their running speed, and their overall athleticism. So if you like this kind of information, like what was in today's video, then you will definitely like my training programs as well. And that support is what helps me and allows me to keep releasing free content like this. So please be sure to grab one. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I really sincerely hope you enjoyed the video. Keep training hard, and I will catch you guys next week.